Let's talk about MIDI quantization. MIDI quantization is the process of moving MIDI notes to the nearest grid to reflect a more accurate performance. And we have to use bars and beats in order to effectively do this. And of course, we really want a solid tempo and a click track to be able to run this. In this example, I'm going to be recording an electronic drum set on a virtual instrument from Native Instruments that will actually perform drums, and because of the inconsistencies that you're about to hear, it's going to need some MIDI quantization. Now, MIDI quantization has two types, and the first one I'm going to show you is MIDI quantization in the post. Let's go. Okay, so a couple things. The performance, while fluidly sloppy back and forth, has some adjusting that we have to make to it, and we can't do it all in one shot. I mean, we could attempt to, but what you're going to see is the more accurate representation of how we quantize the information is to take it in sections. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to duplicate the track so that I can keep my unquantized version. And I'm just going to call this one Q for quantize. So I have a duplicate just in case I need to go back to my original. I'm going to go ahead and double click. And the big thing I'm going to want to do in this is I'm going to want to highlight and maneuver a couple things. Now, one thing you're going to notice about most performers is before you even quantize, you might start realizing that there are specifics to how accurate or inaccurate they are. Meaning you may notice, like in this instance, I'm consistently ahead of the bar no matter where I'm at. And the problem with it is quantization is going to struggle with that idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to slip mode first. I'm going to highlight all my notes, and I'm going to click and drag them so that they're as close as they can be to the start of their bar. And I might pick one out in the middle. Yeah, like this is a good one right here. I'm going to grab the whole group and get them close. Okay, so again, before we just jump in and move everything everywhere, we want to just get everybody nice and close. Okay, now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and save that, and I'm just going to show you how the overall quantization process works. So I'm going to go to Event, Event Operations, Quantize. It's going to bring up a quantization dialog. Now, normally, we only want to quantize the note on. We want to preserve the note durations. In this instance, let's start by doing eighth note quantization, meaning it's going to focus on moving everybody to the nearest eighth note grid, and we won't include any swing or randomization at all. We're just going to go ahead and just give it a straight shot and see how it does. And let's listen back. Okay, not terrible, but the only thing we notice is that it eliminated, because it's moving eighth note, it's eliminating any fast-moving notes that are taking place, and it's actually shuffling them to the nearest bar. It's kind of an easy way to do this. Instead of doing that, I'm going to go to Edit and Undo Quantize, or use Command-Z. So let's undo that real quick. So there's some things about that that are great, that are worth using, and then there's some things that are not so great. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just highlight and work through sections. Kind of the fastest, easiest way to do this with some feel is to apply this in groupings, and let's try that out. Let's try this first section first. Right here it changes, so let's take a listen to what happens. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next straight section and keep going with my eighth note, and then I'm going to come back to those gap transitions that are having problems. Okay, good. Now, from what I can see, this section might actually do just fine all the way up until about here. But it might not be worth it to have too many fast notes going on anyway, so depending on what's being shuffled. I can see a couple of them shuffled here, so maybe, so like there's a couple that are grouped kind of closely. Let's skip over a few of those and then leave some of those in the middle, so see one right there. What I'm going to do is, now what I'll do is I'll start from the front, and as I get to the parts that move fast that are out of time, I'm going to actually make specific changes and instances to them here. And in this option, if you know anything about musical rhythm, we could either go with a straight 16th, or we could swing this a little bit by giving it either a swing option or actually using the tuplet option. So listen to the difference here, and I'm going to undo that. This is what it was. Sorry. Let's try swinging that with a tuplet. Yeah, we can even maybe go eighth note tuplet. And what you notice is it might actually benefit from some combination of. So it doesn't like the tuplet so much there on the first note, but it does like it in other spots. And maybe we start off faster and then tuplet at the end. You know, and so kind of working that out, and we can still make changes to it. You know, and if we don't like that as much, cool part is we go back to what we had. All right, let's go check out the next fill. Now, there's an issue here because this is supposed to be landing on the beat, and it's not landing on the... I can see this is supposed to land on the one, but it's not. So I'm going to have to go to a whole note option to cycle it to the next downbeat. And this might just need to straighten out at the very end. Let's take a listen. And this one might actually need to tighten a bit. All right, so we got that part worked out. So that was essentially our quantization. Now we can swing it more if we'd like. What I oftentimes notice is, like, depending on what instrument it is, it'll be better to make it tighter or looser. So like drums are often nice and tight, but everything else that starts to stack up on top of that can kind of get a little bit more loose and a little bit more loose to have that freedom. The closer you get to something that's making the main melodies, the more you want to have that liberty to have it swing. You don't want it to feel inaccurate, but you also don't want it to feel like a robot.